am running for the City Council in District 20. District 20 is the Greater Flushing area. It goes from Whitestone Expressway to the LIE and goes from the Flushing Corona Meadows Park to Bayside, and it's the seat of Asian American political power. I know this because I worked with John Liu when he was the first Asian American in city politics, and I was his chief of staff. We established the first language access bill that allowed city government to provide programs and services in different languages. I believe language access is critical for the future of the city, and I'm committed as the next council member to ensuring that everyone has equal access to our government. I am also very much in favor of ensuring that everyone has a good home. Too many people are being priced out because the land value has gone up dramatically and rents have skyrocketed, not just for the local residents, but also for the small businesses. Even now with the pandemic, many of our businesses have closed, and so it's so important for people to get involved and to support my campaign, because I am committed to supporting and assisting the small business owners that are the heart and soul of our community. Without the bakeries and the jewelry stores and the cosmetic stores and many of the places that we take for granted, we won't have newspapers and TV stations and churches and other things that really define what it means to be a Korean American in the United States. And I am committed to saving all of the small businesses so that our community can continue to prosper. As a son of Korean immigrants, I feel it's really important to highlight and to promote the stories and the lives of the people who have really made this country the success that it is. It's not just the people on Wall Street that make this country successful. It's the small business owners, it's the immigrants who on Main Street that have made this country successful. And our parents and our grandparents deserve respect, and they deserve the resources and the rights of all citizens of this country. I'm committed to supporting them and making sure that their lives are taken more seriously. I have, during this pandemic, been volunteering for many of the food pantries in our area. We feed currently about 10,000 people every week. I have seen people die on our city streets, senior citizens who have been evicted, who don't have enough food, and that is not right. No one deserves to die alone on our city streets, and I'm committed to making sure that we have properly housed all the senior citizens, make sure that they're fed, and that they are given access to all the resources that city government and taxpayers demand. I'm also very much interested in making sure that our school system is top-notch. We really depend on schools to lift people from poverty into the middle class, and so we need to make sure that we have enough schools in our area. I'm committed to building more schools. Right now, 60% of our classrooms are overcrowded. That means when you send your children to schools right now, that means they don't get enough education. The quality of the education here is not as good as it should be, and we need to make sure that all the schools are fully funded and that we build more of them. I also want to make sure we build a specialized science school in Flushing, because so many of our students go to Stuyvesant or Bronx Science. They should just go to a specialized school in our community and not have to spend 2 to 3 hours every day commuting to these specialized schools. I also believe that we need to invest more in our job training for young people to make sure that they have good careers when they graduate. These are things that could be done if we reshift and reinvest resources into our schools to make sure that things like the City University of New York is tuition free, that we have low subway and bus fares, and that we have enough programs in place, mentoring programs, for example, that allow young people to have the opportunities that they need to be successful. So that's my program, that's my plan for helping this community. I'm running as the only Korean American in this district. Again, I'm a Democrat, and I need your help. My opponents are mostly Chinese Americans. They do not have the best interests of our community at heart, and it's going to be a very close election. My victory could be decided by a few hundred votes, and your participation, your willingness to understand the issues and to get involved in this election will be critical to my success, and I very humbly ask for your support. There's so much at stake now. I mentioned the pandemic, but what happens after this pandemic? Are we going to face a city that is in crisis with high taxes and low services and things that are cut that we desperately need? I don't think it has to be that way. If we have smart government, if we have government that is actually in touch with the needs of the people, I believe, I hope that we can actually prosper as a city. Flushing especially has a lot to offer. I talk about the Flushing Remonstrance. It's something that is very similar, in my view, to the Harlem Renaissance, where you have people from the Caribbean, you have people from the American South. These are African Americans who went to Harlem, and they created new music and new philosophy and new poetry and new literature. They helped to redefine what it meant to be a New Yorker and redefine what it meant to be an American. And I believe that's actually what's happening in Flushing. You have people from Asia and Latin America and other parts of the world coming together and sharing their culture and their struggles, things like K-pop and Bhangra and movies that are very popular in Asia are now very much part of the American mainstream, and we are creating something very new and vital here. It's a hybrid culture that I think is going to, again, redefine what it means to be a New Yorker and what it means to be an American. And so I hope you'll join my campaign, my grassroots campaign to restore power to New Yorkers, the everyday New Yorkers who live and work in our community. So I respectfully ask for your support. Thank you so much.
오늘 말씀 너무 잘 들은 것 같고 우리 잔철 진짜 존경하네요. 왜 그러냐면은 처음에 이렇게 이제 아무래도 마스크 써야 되니까 우리가 혼자 하시라 그랬는데 말씀을 진짜 잘하시고 진짜 이분이 팔레티션인 것 같아요. 정치하시는 분 이분이 왜 그러냐면은 보통 정치하시는 분들이 파지티브하고 인상이 딱 나는 뭐를 할 것이라는 걸 딱 갖고 있잖아. 근데 그게 없으면 보통 분들이 말을 이렇게 머뭇거리고 좀 생각하고 막 이러거든요. 근데 이분 같은 경우는 자기가 나는 이렇게 할 것이고 모든 게 플랜이 돼 있기 때문에 말이 나가는데 한 번도 끊기지 않고 너무 잘 하시는 것 같아요.
감사합니다.
저도 이제 서포트 할 거고요. 우리 한국 분들이 제일 중요한 거는 이제 투표를 많이 안 하세요. 솔직히 너무 힘드시다 보니까 생활 뭐 일하시는데 바쁘고 그런데 이 한 표가 진짜 중요해요. 그래서 꼭 좀 부탁드리겠습니다. 그리고 우리 회장님도 궁금하신 거 많으시다 그러는데 한 말씀 해주시죠.
예, 뭐 제가 마스크를 쓴 게 좀 보기 쉬운 것 같아서 그런데 can I talk in English or Korean?
영어로 해주세요. 왜 그러냐면
Okay,
보시는 분들이 애국 분들이 많으니까 요새는 방송을
okay,
젊은 층도 많이 보고 초기에는 우리 한국 분들만 봤거든요.
yeah,
근데 지금은 젊은 층, 잉글리시, 뭐 스페니시 다 보시더라고.
yeah.
예.
When did you come to Korea? I mean, and to USA?
Actually, I was born in Korea,
Mm-hmm.
But when I was 5, my family moved, and we lived in Sydney, Australia, for about a decade, and then moved to New York. And my family still lives on Staten Island.
Staten Island, I see. And then you raised up mainly in New York City area.
Yes, I went to high school here. I went to college and also graduate school.
Grad school also. I heard you went to Chicago University.
Yes, I got a master's in public policy from the University of Chicago.
I see. That's why it made you be a politician.
I don't know about that.
What make you come to be a politician?
Well,
What make-
I actually started in 1996. At that time, the councilwoman Julia Harrison, she told the New York Times that the Asian immigrants moving into our districts in Flushing are robbers and thieves, and that we came to destroy and conquer the neighborhood. Many of us, including myself, were very angry and upset. We protested,
Right,
but nothing happened, and she got reelected.
right.
And at that point, I joined up with my friend John Liu, who also went to Binghamton University with me in my undergraduate program. And I supported John Liu. He became the first Asian American elected official in New York.
I see.
And that's when I got involved in politics here to help the community. And I feel very empowered because we came from a position of weakness, of someone telling us and scapegoating us and telling us you are the problem, to then flipping that around to say, actually, if we organize and mobilize, we have a lot of power as Asian Americans, and we can now transform the political system to benefit our community, and that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, I remember those days. I remember the John Choe, and he was, first person to be elected politician, and he
Yes.
worked so many things to Asian.
Right.
So that's why I give him credit for that. Very nice man.
Right.
So, what about your family? Your parents don't mind?
You know, my family is very typical of Korean families. They wanted me to be a doctor or a lawyer
Yeah, I remember.
and make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I went in a different direction of service to my community. Sometimes it's a huge sacrifice to want to find ways to help other people. You know, I feel like I let my parents down a little bit because they could have been well off if I had made a lot of money. But I think part of the story for me is that when they owned a store on Staten Island,
Right.
they were forced to close that store, and they lost everything because they had invested their hearts, their soul, their blood, sweat, and tears into that business. And when you lose a business, it's not just this identity issue. It's about losing your sense of self and losing your children. And it was heartbreaking for my parents. And my mother actually, her health deteriorated very quickly. She ended up dying of cancer. And I feel that it's really important for young people to understand the sacrifice of our parents. We have to do everything we can, including political power, to make sure that our parents live a life of dignity and they're not persecuted, and they don't lose all of their life savings when their business has to close. That's what's going on right now with the pandemic. You have hundreds of thousands of business people losing their livelihoods and their sense of identity and their future because the government didn't do enough to protect us from this pandemic.
Right.
If you look at the South Korean government or even a poor country like Vietnam, very few deaths from the pandemic. The government intervened very quickly and effectively to control the spread of the virus. We demand that our government do the same
I see.
because we understand that other countries have done better.
Right.
And what is resulting is we have more than 200,000 Americans who have died. 200,000.
Right.
So sad.
It's a huge tragedy. And that was totally unnecessary. It was preventable if we had good leadership in the city and the state and the federal government, we wouldn't have to go through this. We wouldn't be having to wear these masks. 1 year after the pandemic started, to me, that's a violation of our rights. And it's also, people talk about the attacks on Asians now. Those are the most visible attacks. I think that we have to also look at the invisible attacks on the Asian community. The many people who have lost their businesses, they lost their jobs, their homes, many of them not having enough food to eat. That's also violence against our community. So we have to make sure that the people who we elect, that we pay taxes to, we have to hold them accountable. We cannot let them to do that again, because this could happen again. This kind of pandemic, it's not something that just happens once every 100 years. Now it's becoming more frequent with overdevelopment in areas like China and Africa and Latin America. There's going to be more contact with new animals and new diseases that are going to cause a similar problem. So we have to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Okay, you're right. I really appreciate what you are thinking, and I'm totally 100% agree.
Thank you.
Okay, now if you are elected as a city councilman, what is your first priority to serve the community?
My first priority is to, again, I mentioned this before, we have to look at what are the community needs and to start a community-based planning process. That means that we bring together the entire community, the business people, the people who are religious leaders, the people who are our civic leaders, different industries coming together and planning the future of our community together, so that no one is left out, that all of our major needs are being addressed. When we have development and proposals to develop our community, those proposals must be in line with the plan that we come up with. So if we have 60% overcrowding in our schools, we have to make sure that any future development builds more schools. If we have people who are facing eviction and are overcrowded in their current apartments, we have to build more housing. Not just for low-income people, but middle-income people in New York City. They can't afford to live in Flushing anymore. So that's my priority, is to come up with a plan, a community-based plan that actually addresses the issues and then start making decisions that actually meet those needs. And that's my first priority.
Okay, now just summing up what you said, just say a few words to the Korean community. What do you want to do in a very briefly, we have time limit.
Again, I'm a proud son of Koreans, the Korean community. This past March, we celebrated the March 1st movement. It was a movement to liberate the Korean people from slavery and colonization by the Japanese. And that makes me very proud to understand that our people were able to overcome a brutal imperial dictatorship, a system that was oppressing our people, that was taking away our language, that was taking away our people and forcing them to work in the Japanese military, kidnapping young girls and women and forcing them into sexual slavery. We overcame that. This pandemic is also a crisis in our community, but we can also overcome that if we work together and we elect Korean Americans to the city council and to state and federal government. We can overcome and prosper as a people and survive. And that's my hope and my desire. And I ask the people in the Korean community to please join me in this fight and this struggle for the future of our community.
예, 여러분 잘 들으셨죠?
예.
예, 선거구 29입니다. 선거구.
John Choe.
꼭 John Choe를 기억해 주십시오. 20구역, 20 스트리트. 예.
그래요. 너무 감사하고요. Thank you for coming, and we're gonna, make sure you get elected. We'll make sure we're working hard, teamwork. Okay?
감사합니다.
Okay,
네,
감사합니다.
감사합니다.
감사합니다.